Right then, I touched on this briefly in my last video, and it was regarding Boris Johnson and how much of a hypocrite he is and how easily he forgets. I mean, my goodness, I can't believe I voted for this guy when he became Prime Minister and he had that huge majority. Then again, it was between him and Jeremy Corbyn. So for me, Boris was the best of a bad bunch. And so Boris Johnson has joined in on the witch hunt against Nigel Farage and what he said during that interview on Panorama the other night. Now, those of you who did listen to it intently and remember what was said, Nigel Farage did mention quite clearly that he wasn't a fan of Putin. Putin isn't a nice man, and even though his invasion of the Ukraine was unjustified, it was NATO and the West who gave him the excuse, and that's a fact. There's no lie in that. Nigel is not a Putin apologist. He's not infected with Putinism, as apparently said by Zelensky. I know Nigel Farage has made his position clear, but as ever, with a right-winger in politics who's popular, his words are always going to be twisted to suit the other side's narrative. And this attack on Farage by Boris Johnson, the Daily Mail and the Conservatives just shows their hand really of who they really are. And we back these people in elections against the far left under Corbyn. And the only reason being is there was no one else. It's that simple. Now, Boris Johnson popped onto Twitter and had a pop at Farage. And this is what he said, and I quote, "This is nauseating ahistorical drivel and more Kremlin propaganda. Nobody provoked Putin. Nobody poked the bear with a stick. The people of Ukraine voted overwhelmingly in 1991 to be a sovereign and independent country. They were perfectly entitled to seek both NATO and EU membership. There is only one person responsible for Russian aggression against Ukraine." And this is the bit I want you to remember, all right? Both in 2014 and 2022. And that is Putin. To try to spread the blame is morally repugnant and parroting Putin's lies. End quote. And the rest of that tweet is just ramping up support for Ukraine and pushing for the war to drag on, and basically Boris Johnson warmongering, which seems to be his full-time job now. But notice what he said there. He said there's only one person responsible for Russian aggression against the Ukraine both in 2014 and 2022. And yet, only 2 years ago, in the newspapers, Boris Johnson blamed the European Union for war in the Ukraine. And as you can see here, he blamed the EU for Russia's 2014 attacks on the Ukraine as well. So it's okay when Boris Johnson does it. But because Nigel Farage says it, and Nigel Farage is currently a huge threat to the Conservatives, Reform are trouncing them in the polls. And of course the Tories have wheeled him out to bat for them, even after they stabbed him in the back. Just smells to me of rank hypocrisy. The Conservatives have been backed into a corner, and that's when an animal is most dangerous, isn't it? And so idiots like Boris Johnson will forget what he said merely a few years ago, along with the newspapers, and they'll parrot each other, promote each other, in order to bring Nigel Farage and Reform down. And there we go. I told you guys it was going to get worse. I just knew the flak was going to get heavier. And there's 2 weeks left before the election, so expect things to get even worse. And that's that. I'm past 49. Thanks for listening. And until the next time, Roger Trout.